So questions or comments? I would love to hear what our people are most concerned about. There's so much to this topic. In my book, I pulled from a lot of different sources. For me, as a school psychologist, I thought about, honestly, I woke up one day and said, I need to put my parents on an IEP. That's what I need, right? I need to have a plan and I need to put it together. And I would encourage people to think about, what are you good at, and put that plan together based on what your needs are. But I'd like to hear some questions or comments, or if anybody has any thoughts.
Christy, I have a question related to long distance care for parents in these situations, and also
Right.
if you want to think about it, I really like the way you talked about building your team and forming your team and getting everybody on the right page, but multi-generational teams as well,
Right.
and how to manage that, as well as what kind of an impact that has on an aging parent who is having to interact with them, particularly as they get significantly older and you start having issues with cognitive relativism with each individual person, and maintaining those kind of those mental relationships as well.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, the average American probably moves 11 times from the time they were born. No, we're not static anymore. We leave because of jobs. We leave because of college. We leave because of military service. We leave because we want to leave. And mom and dad might stay someplace. Mom and dad might move around a lot. Who knows? So yeah, this kind of being all over the place is pretty common. And what I found is that, again, the things are very different from state to state. So really, it's important to kind of start at to find information, is to start at the state level. I would just Google like the state's aging council, and see if you can find some lead-ins to different places that might help you with financial things. Like, what are the financial recommendations? What are the financial laws? What are the advanced healthcare directives? Those kinds of things. And then I'd ask for resources. Listen, I wasn't above for myself talking to neighbors about what was going on. Find other people that have been through it, and that's what I do talk about building your teams. You can't know everything, and we don't always know what we don't know. You can start with your own attorney, or find an attorney who does this in your own state, and ask, can you help me find out more about what's happening in Idaho or Nebraska or New Mexico? Because that's where you're going to have to understand the playing field, is what's happening legally and financially there. Banks are a little bit easier because there's certainly a lot of federal oversight on that, but it's important to know what you've got going on, and that's the dig, right? That's where you have to start being a detective and finding out as much as you can. And so there isn't one answer. I would say it's very difficult to do it a long distance, but here's the other piece. Moving your parents isn't always the best thing either. Your parents might have been in a place for a long time and have community, and taking them away from a community that is important to them can be an emotional, it creates an emotional deficit for them. They don't have the support systems they need. So then it's really just trying to work with what other services you might have there. I highly recommend looking for geriatric case managers. Even though I just watched the movie with Rosamund Pike,
Yeah.
and who made it look really terrible, and let me tell you, that does happen. I think you can find really good people if you do a little due diligence. And that's another thing that can really help you. If you can't be there, right, it's not feasible for you to uproot your family and move to where mom and dad are, or move mom and dad, then I think you have to rely on some of the services and agencies that are out there. This is becoming a burgeoning industry, and it's only increased over the last few years, and certainly over the last year, we've started to see some of the difficulties in it. So I think it's important to kind of look through it from that lens, like what's going to be best for your parents, and uprooting might not be the best, but there are some systems in place other places, and that's where you're going to build your team. Definitely financial, definitely legal, and doctors, right? Get advanced healthcare directives if you can. I would, if you, I don't have it to throw up in the chat, but there's a great resource called Next Avenue. And in there, if you Google Next Avenue, Atul Gawande, he wrote an amazing book called Being Mortal. But in this, he did a video with Next Avenue that talks about 5 things you want to talk to your parents about. And it's really about what they want for the end of their life, right? And it's not like, do I want to be buried or cremated? It's how do I want, and it's really not even about death, it's about living. How do I want to live out these last years of my life? And that's what's important to get to. So I would definitely recommend that resource to people. The book is great, and definitely his 5 questions here are important. Not sure I fully answered your question, Cam, but that's
that's very helpful. It's very, we went through that with my my grandmother, and it was a very complicated situation with some grandchildren who were close by but were constrained, and my mother was her remaining living child, who was kind of trying to oversee things but doing so from 1,200 miles away, that kind of a deal, or probably farther than that. So it required like a whole SWAT team of people flying in and out over the last like 3 years to like check and make sure that things were happening. And to your I care a lot point too, also included somebody trying to buy a car in her name and all kinds of stuff. I mean, those kind of things happen. So just the ability for other people to take advantage of the situation and needing to stay on top of it is always such a concern personally, as my own parents age there, but at the same time, want to be understanding and about that exact dynamic you outlined there, the fact that they have their own kind of community where they are and where we grew up, even if their children are no longer nearby. So trying to figure out the right balance there is tough.
And things have shifted in insurance. Usually, like my parents paid a lot of money to have long-term healthcare insurance, but it only provided for assisted living or nursing home. It did not provide for in-home care. In-home care can be really amazing. You do have to monitor the people who come in, right? And it is important to check up on them or find out about them. But there's something about being able to stay in your own place. I'm struggling with my husband, and I are still technically in the sandwich generation. His parents are aging, and they live in a 3-story home, and they just like, there's nowhere you can go in that house that you don't have to use stairs. And my mother's has had 3 knee replacements. She has 2 knees. She's had 3 replacements. This is not easy, right? So, but a whole lot of reasons why that won't work right now for them to move. Lots to think about. So there's never an easy fix for a lot of these things. So
thank you, Christy, for answering that. There's a question here from Jess as well in the chat. She's asking if you would give some advice on how to help young children deal with the loss of a loved one. Her great-grandparents are not in great shape, she says. So looking for a little guidance there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a great question. And dealing with kids are, can I just ask, what age are the kids? Just let me know.
Jess, feel free to chime in, or there you go.
No, my daughter she's almost 5. So she's a really little one.
Yeah. So it's very important to be clear and honest, even with little ones. At 5, she probably isn't going to fully understand death, but it's important not to say things like, great grandma went away, because then there's the expectation she's going to come back. It's important not to say things like, well, she went to sleep. For little kids, I might recommend things like if you've ever lost a pet, to talk about how we loved them and then their life ended. And but they loved us while they were here, and that's what I would focus on. Um, there's I was just actually the other day I was in my car, and there was a great I was listening to some podcast, and there was a great reference to this with kids. And the leader in all of this for kids is Sesame Street, and Sesame Street did a great thing about how to talk to kids about death, and that was one of the things they talked about, is how do you say this at different ages. Um, and I think it's just about being clear, concrete, asking them what questions they have, what fears they have. The danger in dancing around it is it leaves it wide open, and then they're worried. They're worried about you. If you tell someone that, great grandma went to sleep, I'd be afraid to go to sleep that night, and I'd be afraid to have you go to sleep that night. So we want to be very clear. And even though it sounds like, wow, that's too heavy for them, kids are pretty resilient. And even at that age, they do understand, um, they're able to understand that something can end. And we focus then on how much they loved us while they were here, and how much we loved them, and what are the memories we're going to take forward. And that's what I would focus on. And then I would be willing to have those memories and talk about them. My kids and I talk about my parents all the time. Uh, and yet I know people who never talk about someone who's died. So but it's important for us to be able to have those very clear and concrete. We don't want to go into great detail. We don't need to say how and why and what was this, and just, this is how life happens. This is what happens. And we can see that in nature. We can experience that, and it hurts, and we'll still be okay. And so that's what I would kind of focus on. I hope that's helpful. If I could give you the link to Sesame Street, I would say that's a great one to talk about.